A single dad danced with a crying billionaire in an empty venue, but when she whispered her shocking request, his entire world flipped upside down. What secret could a billionaire beg from a man who has nothing left to lose? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain drummed against the tall windows of the grand ballroom, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the emptying charity gala. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the last few guests hurried to their cars, leaving behind half-empty champagne glasses and scattered programs on the elegant tables. Ethan Miller adjusted his black waiter's vest and began collecting abandoned plates, his movements efficient from years of hard work. The fancy event wasn't his usual scene. He was more comfortable under a car hood at his auto shop than serving hors d'oeuvres to the town's elite. But when the community center needed volunteers, he couldn't say no. That's just who he was. As he worked his way through the tables, a quiet sob caught his attention. He looked up to see a solitary figure at the main table, Isabella Hartwell, the event's hostess. Even from a distance, he could see her shoulders trembling slightly as she stared down at her hands. Ethan paused, a stack of plates in his grip. He'd seen Isabella throughout the evening, of course. It was hard to miss her in that elegant blue dress, making polite conversation with guests and writing generous checks for the charity. But something had seemed off about her smile. A little too practiced, a little too brittle. Now, alone in the vast ballroom with only the storm for company, that perfectly maintained facade had cracked. Another crack of thunder made the crystal chandeliers sway slightly. The rain intensified, sheets of water streaming down the windows. Ethan set the plates down quietly and watched as Isabella lifted a hand to wipe her cheeks, probably thinking no one could see her moment of vulnerability. He knew that look. He'd seen it in his own mirror plenty of times after Sarah passed away. That bone-deep loneliness that felt like it would swallow you whole, the kind that hit hardest when you were surrounded by people but felt completely alone. Isabella pulled a tissue from her small clutch, dabbing at her eyes carefully to preserve what remained of her makeup. The motion was practiced, like she'd done it many times before. The thought made something twist in Ethan's chest. The soft music from the sound system was still playing, forgotten in the rush to escape the storm. The melody floated through the empty space, something slow and a little sad, matching the weather outside. Ethan straightened his vest again, a nervous habit. He shouldn't intrude on her private moment. He was just the volunteer waiter, after all. And she was Isabella Hartwell, the billionaire everyone in town whispered about but never really knew. But he couldn't shake the memory of those endless nights after Sarah died, when the silence in his house felt like a physical weight. If it hadn't been for Lily needing him, he might have drowned in that silence. Taking a deep breath, Ethan walked slowly toward Isabella's table. His dress shoes clicked softly on the polished floor, and he saw her quickly try to compose herself as she heard him approach. "Miss Hartwell?" he said gently, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but still striking. "Yes?" Her voice was steady, but he could hear the slight tremor beneath the practiced control. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly unsure of himself. But something in her expression, a flash of raw loneliness before she could hide it, made him continue. "Would you like to dance?" Isabella blinked, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, she just stared at him, and Ethan felt his face grow warm. What was he thinking? He was about to apologize and retreat when she spoke. "Dance?" she repeated softly, as if testing the word. "Yes, ma'am." Ethan gestured to the empty ballroom. "Seems a shame to waste such a nice space, and the music's still playing." A tear escaped down her cheek, but this time she didn't rush to wipe it away. "You're one of the volunteer waiters," she said, not unkindly. "Ethan Miller," he introduced himself with a small smile. "I usually fix cars, but I can manage a decent waltz if you're willing to risk your toes." The tiniest hint of a real smile touched her lips, nothing like the polished one she'd worn all evening. This one was small and uncertain, but genuine. The storm crashed outside, but in that moment, the vast ballroom felt somehow smaller, more intimate. Ethan held out his hand, palm up, an offer without pressure. Sometimes it helps to just move when things feel heavy. Isabella looked at his offered hand for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her fingers in his palm. Her hand was soft, but he could feel it trembling slightly. "Yes," she whispered, rising from her chair with natural grace despite her emotional state. "I think I would like to dance." Ethan noticed how her tears caught the light of the chandeliers as she nodded, transforming them from marks of sadness into something almost beautiful, like rain on crystal. Here was a woman who seemed to have everything, yet sat alone crying when everyone else had gone. And here he was, a widowed mechanic in a borrowed waiter's vest, offering her a dance. Before he could talk himself out of it, Ethan crossed the empty ballroom, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Isabella looked up as he approached, quickly trying to compose herself. "Would you like to dance?" The words came out softer than he'd intended, almost lost in the sound of rain. He held out his hand, calloused from years of mechanical work. Isabella stared at his offered hand, her eyes widening slightly. A tear still clung to her lashes, catching the light from the chandeliers above. "Dance?" she whispered, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. "The music's still playing," Ethan said, gesturing to the forgotten speakers. "And it seems a shame to waste such a nice ballroom." For a moment, he thought she might refuse. But then she placed her delicate hand in his, and he helped her to her feet. Her blue dress whispered against the floor as they moved to the center of the room. Ethan placed his other hand carefully at her waist, maintaining a respectful distance. He wasn't much of a dancer. Sarah had always teased him about his 2 left feet, but he could manage a simple, slow dance. They began to move together, swaying gently to the music. Thunder rolled outside, but in here, everything felt strangely peaceful. Isabella's hand trembled slightly in his, and he could feel the tension in her shoulders. "I'm probably not what you expected for a dance partner," Ethan said quietly, trying to ease her nervousness. "Just a mechanic playing dress-up tonight." Isabella's grip tightened slightly on his shoulder. "You're kind," she murmured. "That's rarer than you might think." As they turned slowly, Ethan caught their reflection in one of the tall windows. They made an odd pair, him in his borrowed waiter's uniform, her in that elegant dress that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. But there was something about the way she held on to him, like she was afraid he might disappear. "I saw you earlier," Isabella said suddenly, "with that little girl who ran in from the rain. Your daughter?" Ethan smiled, thinking of Lily's impromptu visit during his dinner break, her raincoat dripping on the kitchen floor as she insisted on showing him her art project. "Yes, that's my Lily. She's 8 going on 30 if you ask her. She has your smile," Isabella said softly. "The real kind. The one that reaches your eyes." She paused, then added almost inaudibly, "I've forgotten how to smile like that." The music shifted to a new song, equally slow and melancholic. Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the empty tables around them. "My parents." Isabella's voice was barely a whisper now. "They threw parties like this all the time. Hundreds of people would come, all wanting something from us. But no one ever just danced. No one ever just stayed when the crowds left." Ethan felt her fingers curl tighter into his shoulder, felt the slight tremor in her breath. He remembered what it was like, those first raw months after Sarah died, when even the simplest human contact felt like a lifeline. "Please." Isabella's whisper was so faint he almost missed it. Her head bowed slightly, almost touching his shoulder. "Help me remember what it feels like to be part of a family." The request hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. Ethan's steps faltered for a moment, caught off guard by the naked longing in her voice. This close, he could smell her expensive perfume, but underneath it was something else, the salt of tears. They danced in silence after that, moving in slow circles as the storm continued its symphony outside. Isabella's head gradually came to rest against his shoulder, and Ethan found himself holding her a little closer, offering what comfort he could. As the song drew to a close, they slowly pulled apart. Isabella's makeup was slightly smudged, but her eyes seemed clearer now, more present. "I should get you to your car," Ethan said gently. "The storm's not letting up." Isabella nodded, stepping back and smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Ethan retrieved his umbrella from behind the service counter. Not fancy, just a sturdy black one he kept in his truck. They walked together through the empty hallways, their footsteps echoing against the marble. At the entrance, Ethan opened the umbrella and held it over them both as they stepped into the rain. Isabella's car waited at the curb, a sleek, expensive vehicle that probably cost more than Ethan's house. Before getting in, she turned to him and gripped his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her eyes held something new, a tiny spark of hope, fragile but unmistakable. "Thank you," she said simply, her hand lingering in his for a moment longer. Then she slipped into her car, and Ethan watched as the taillights disappeared into the rainy night, leaving him alone with the sound of the storm and the memory of a dance he never expected to share. Morning sunlight streamed through the small kitchen window of Ethan's modest home, casting warm patches on the worn linoleum floor. The familiar sizzle of bacon filled the air as he stood at the stove, occasionally glancing at his daughter Lily, who sat at their scratched wooden table surrounded by craft supplies. "And then Miss Thompson said we have to make a family tree," Lily explained, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she colored with determined focus. "Can we put Mom's picture in it?" Ethan's hand tightened briefly on the spatula. "Of course we can, sweetheart. I was thinking of using that one where she's wearing her yellow dress," Lily continued, reaching for a purple crayon. "The one from the park. That's a good choice." He flipped the bacon, trying to keep his voice steady. It was her favorite dress. The doorbell's unexpected chime made them both jump. Ethan frowned, checking his watch. It was barely 8 in the morning. "I'll get it." Lily scrambled down from her chair. "Hold on there, kiddo." Ethan quickly moved the pan off the heat. "Let me check first." He wiped his hands on his worn jeans and headed for the front door, Lily trailing closely behind him. Through the frosted glass, he could make out an elegant silhouette that seemed strangely familiar. When he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. Isabella Hartwell stood on his modest front porch, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly natural in a simple cream sweater and dark jeans. In her hands, she held a familiar blue scarf. "I'm sorry to disturb you so early," she said, her usual confidence wavering slightly. "But you left this at the gala last night. When you gave me your umbrella." "Oh." Ethan's hand went to his neck, remembering. "You didn't have to bring it yourself. I mean, thank you, but you look like a princess." Lily's voice piped up from behind him, full of wonder. Isabella's eyes widened, and a genuine smile spread across her face as she caught sight of the little girl. "Well, thank you. And who might you be?" "I'm Lily," she declared proudly, stepping forward. "I'm 7. Do you want to see my family tree? I'm making it for school." Ethan started to intervene, but Isabella was already kneeling down to Lily's level, her expensive jeans touching the worn welcome mat without hesitation. "I would love to see your family tree, Lily. That sounds like a wonderful project." The scent of slightly burning bacon suddenly reached them. "Oh, shoot," Ethan muttered. Would you like to come in? Just for a minute? While I save breakfast? Please?" Lily added, grabbing Isabella's hand with the uninhibited trust of childhood. "Daddy makes the best bacon, even when it's a little burnt." A laugh escaped Isabella, genuine and warm, unlike the polished society laughs Ethan had heard at the gala. "Well, with an invitation like that, how can I refuse?" She followed them into the small house, and Ethan felt a sudden self-consciousness about the cramped space, the mismatched furniture, the crayon marks on the wall that he hadn't quite managed to clean off. But Isabella didn't seem to notice any of it. Her attention was fully on Lily, who was eagerly showing her the construction paper and photos spread across the kitchen table. "That's my mom," Lily said, pointing to a photograph. "She's in heaven now, but Daddy says we can still put her in the family tree because she's always with us." Ethan busied himself with the bacon, his throat tight. He heard Isabella's gentle response. "Of course she should be in the family tree. She's beautiful. You have her smile." "Really?" The joy in Lily's voice was unmistakable. "Daddy, did you hear that? I have Mom's smile." "You sure do, sweetheart." Ethan managed to save most of the bacon and turned around to find Isabella seated at his kitchen table, her designer purse resting against one of his yard sale chairs, looking for all the world like she belonged there. "Would you like some breakfast?" he offered, more out of ingrained politeness than anything else. "It's nothing fancy, just bacon and eggs." "Oh, I shouldn't," Isabella began, but Lily interrupted. "Please stay. You can help me with the glitter. Daddy's not very good at glitter." "That's because glitter is evil and never goes away," Ethan said dryly, making both Lily and Isabella laugh. "I suppose I could stay for a little while?" Isabella said softly, meeting Ethan's eyes with a question in her own. He nodded, and she turned back to Lily. "I'd be honored to help with the glitter." The next half hour passed in a strange, comfortable blur. Isabella helped Lily carefully apply glitter to her family tree while Ethan served up breakfast. To his surprise, Isabella ate her slightly burnt bacon with obvious enjoyment, complimenting his cooking with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "This is wonderful," she said, and somehow he knew she meant more than just the food. There was a wistfulness in her voice that echoed her words from the night before, her wish to remember what family felt like. All too soon, Isabella glanced at her watch and stood up. "I should go. I have a meeting." "But we're not finished with the glitter," Lily protested. "Lily," Ethan said gently, "Miss Hartwell has important things to do." "Isabella," she corrected softly. "Please, call me Isabella." She gathered her purse and headed for the door, but paused on the threshold, looking back at their small home. Something in her expression made Ethan's heart twist, a mixture of longing and gratitude that seemed too raw for such a brief encounter. "Thank you," she said simply. "For breakfast. For—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything and nothing. "Thank you for the scarf," Ethan replied, holding up the forgotten blue fabric. "And for the glitter assistance." She smiled, gave a small wave to Lily, and walked to her car. A surprisingly modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicle he'd expected. They watched her drive away, Lily pressed against his side. "Will she come back?" Lily asked hopefully. Ethan sighed, looking down at his daughter's upturned face. "I don't know, sweetheart." How could he explain the vast differences between their worlds? How could he tell her that people like Isabella Hartwell didn't usually make a habit of visiting small houses with burnt bacon and yard sale furniture? "I hope she does," Lily said decidedly, heading back to her family tree. "She knows how to do glitter right." The afternoon sun beat down on Ethan's auto repair as he wiped grease from his hands with a worn red shop rag. The familiar sense of motor oil and rubber filled the air, mixing with the metallic ping of cooling engines. 3 cars waited for repairs in the small lot. Not enough to keep his business afloat, but he was grateful for what work he had. The sound of dress shoes clicking against concrete made him look up. Mr. Peterson, his banker, walked toward him with an unusually cheerful expression. The sight made Ethan's stomach knot. Bankers showing up unannounced rarely meant good news. "Mr. Miller," Peterson called out, clutching a leather briefcase. "Got a minute to talk?" Ethan nodded, leading him to the cramped office in the corner of the shop. Papers covered his desk, and the ancient ceiling fan squeaked as it turned. "What brings you by, Mr. Peterson?" The banker settled into the creaky chair across from him. "Well, I have some rather extraordinary news." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Your business loan. It's been paid in full." Ethan blinked. "What?" "Paid off completely." Peterson's smile widened. "Including all late fees and interest." There must be some mistake. Ethan leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. "I haven't made any payments beyond the minimum." "No mistake." Peterson spread the papers in front of him. "The transaction was processed yesterday. Everything's been settled." "By who?" "I'm afraid that information is confidential." Peterson straightened his tie. "The benefactor wished to remain anonymous." Ethan's jaw clenched. Only one person he knew had that kind of money, and the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The dance at the gala, Lily meeting her, and now this? "I need to know who did this," he insisted, his voice tight. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. "As I said, it's confidential. But I can tell you it was all completely legal and above board. You're free and clear, Mr. Miller. Most people would be celebrating. Ethan stood up, pacing the small office. I didn't ask for this. I don't want— He stopped himself, taking a deep breath. Thank you for letting me know, Mr. Peterson. The banker gathered his papers, clearly sensing Ethan's mood. Well, congratulations again. You're one of the lucky ones. Lucky. The word felt like acid in Ethan's throat. After Peterson left, he sat at his desk, staring at the old photo of him and his late wife on their wedding day. They'd started this shop together, built it from nothing. Every payment, every struggle had been earned through honest work. He grabbed his keys and headed for his truck. The drive to Isabella's estate took 20 minutes, each passing mile fueling his anger. Her mansion rose before him like something from another world, all marble columns and manicured gardens. A security guard at the gate eyed him suspiciously. I need to see Isabella Hartwell, Ethan said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Do you have an appointment? No, but she'll want to, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to. It's all right, James. Isabella's voice came through the guard's radio. Let him in. The gate swung open, and Ethan drove up the winding driveway. Isabella waited on the front steps, wearing a simple blue dress that probably cost more than his monthly income. Her face showed concern, but no surprise. Ethan, what's wrong? He got out of his truck, trying to keep his voice level. Did you pay off my loan? She hesitated for just a moment, long enough to confirm his suspicions. Let's talk inside, she said softly. No. He stayed where he was. Just tell me the truth. Did you do it? Isabella lifted her chin. Yes, I did. Why? The word came out sharper than he intended. Because I could help, so I did. She took a step toward him. Your business was struggling. I had the means to— To what? Save the poor mechanic? His laugh was bitter. I never asked for your charity. It wasn't charity, Ethan. She moved closer, her eyes pleading. I care about you and Lily. I just wanted to help. Help? He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? I'm not some project for you to fix. I don't need a billionaire swooping in to rescue me. That's not what this was about. Her voice cracked slightly. After the gala, after meeting Lily, I thought we were becoming friends. Friends don't go behind each other's backs. He turned back toward his truck. I've worked for everything I have. It might not be much, but it's mine. I earned it. Ethan, please. Thank you for your generosity, Miss Hartwell, he said formally, climbing into his truck. But I don't want your help. Not like this. He drove away, not looking back at her, standing alone on those grand steps. In his rearview mirror, the mansion grew smaller until it disappeared completely, like some impossible dream he had no business believing in. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fairgrounds as Ethan guided Lily through the bustling crowd. Colorful flags fluttered overhead, and the air was thick with the sweet scent of cotton candy and buttered popcorn. His daughter's small hand clutched his tightly as they weaved between families and groups of laughing teenagers. Can we go on the Ferris wheel, Daddy? Lily pointed at the towering structure that dominated the fairground's skyline. Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement, making Ethan's heart squeeze. These were the moments he lived for, seeing pure joy on his little girl's face. Of course, sweetie. He ruffled her hair, grateful he'd managed to save enough for a day at the fair. Money had been tight since he'd refused Isabella's help with the auto shop loan. The memory of that confrontation still made his chest tighten with a mix of pride and regret. They joined the line for the Ferris wheel, Lily bouncing on her toes as she watched the cars swing gently above them. That's when Ethan spotted her Isabella, standing near a carnival game booth, looking surprisingly casual in jeans and a simple white blouse. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for a moment, neither moved. Miss Isabella! Lily's shriek broke the spell. Before Ethan could stop her, his daughter had broken free from his grip and was running toward the billionaire, her pigtails flying behind her. Isabella knelt to catch Lily in a warm hug, her face lighting up with genuine happiness. Hello, sweetheart. You look so pretty in that dress. Ethan approached slowly, hands stuffed in his pockets. Isabella, he managed, trying to keep his voice neutral. Didn't expect to see you here. I've never been to a small-town fair before, she admitted, straightening up. There was something vulnerable in her expression that reminded him of that rainy night at the gala. I wanted to see what it was like. You've never been on a Ferris wheel? Lily gasped, her face a picture of disbelief. Daddy and I were just going. You have to come with us. She grabbed Isabella's hand, tugging insistently. Lily? Ethan started to protest, but Isabella cut in gently. I'd love to if your father doesn't mind. Her eyes met his, asking permission without words. The hopeful looks on both their faces made it impossible to refuse. Fine, he sighed, but I'm paying for the tickets. They waited in line together, Lily chattering excitedly between them about school and her favorite rides. Isabella listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Lily's stories. Ethan found himself watching them, noticing how naturally they interacted, how Isabella's careful poise melted away when she smiled at his daughter. The Ferris wheel car swayed as they climbed in, Lily insisting on sitting between them. As they rose higher, the fairgrounds spread out below them in a tapestry of lights and movement. Lily pressed her face against the safety bar, pointing out everything she could see. Look, there's my school, and Daddy's shop, and the ice cream place where we got sundaes last week. Isabella leaned forward, following Lily's excited gestures. It's beautiful up here, she said softly. You can see the whole town. This is the best part, Lily announced as their car reached the top. The wheel paused, leaving them suspended above the world. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and a cool breeze carried the distant sound of carnival music. As they completed their third rotation, Lily's enthusiasm for the Ferris wheel gave way to interest in other attractions. Can we try the carousel next, please? What followed was a whirlwind tour of the fairgrounds. Lily led them from ride to ride, her excitement infectious. Isabella won her a stuffed unicorn at the ring toss, displaying surprising skill, and Ethan bought them all cotton candy, watching in amusement as Isabella tried the sticky treat for the first time. I can't believe you've never had cotton candy before, he found himself saying as they walked, their earlier tension gradually easing. Isabella laughed, wiping sugar from her fingers. There are a lot of simple things I've never experienced. My parents. They didn't believe in frivolous activities. The sadness in her voice made Ethan look at her differently. He'd been so quick to judge her wealth, he'd forgotten about the person beneath it. As evening settled over the fairgrounds, the first fireworks burst overhead in a shower of gold and red. Families gathered on blankets and chairs to watch the display. Ethan found a spot on a grassy hill, spreading out the blanket he'd brought for Lily. They sat together, Lily between them again, her head resting against Isabella's shoulder as she pointed out her favorite explosions. The lights painted their faces in shifting colors, and Ethan couldn't help noticing how content they both looked. A particularly spectacular burst of blue and silver lit up the sky, drawing gasps from the crowd. In that moment of collective wonder, Lily's clear voice rang out, "Daddy, can she be my mommy?" The question hung in the air, like smoke from the fireworks. Ethan felt his face flush hot as nearby families turned to look at them. Isabella had gone very still, her eyes wide and glistening in the flickering light. The fireworks continued overhead, but Ethan barely noticed them anymore. His daughter's innocent question had cracked open something he'd been trying to keep sealed away. He looked at Isabella, seeing the way she held Lily protectively, the gentle trembling of her hands, the hope and fear warring in her expression. More families turned to watch the scene unfolding on their blanket, their whispers carrying on the evening breeze. The small-town grapevine would be buzzing tomorrow, he knew. The auto mechanic, the billionaire, and the little girl who wanted them to be a family, it was too good a story not to spread. But in that moment, with his daughter's question echoing in his ears and Isabella's eyes meeting his across the space between them, Ethan couldn't bring himself to care what anyone else thought. The walls he'd built around his heart since losing his wife were crumbling, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild them. The evening air had grown cool as the fair began winding down. Most families had already left, leaving behind a quieter atmosphere filled with the gentle hum of the remaining rides and scattered conversations. Ethan stood near the cotton candy stand, watching Lily play with some other children by the carousel. The fairy lights strung above cast a soft glow over everything, making the whole scene feel dreamlike. He noticed Isabella approaching before she reached him. She'd changed from her usual elegant attire into simple jeans and a sweater, but somehow she still looked out of place, like a rare bird that had landed in someone's backyard by mistake. "Ethan?" she said softly, stopping a few feet away. Her hands were clasped together, betraying her nervousness. "I was hoping we could talk." Ethan shifted his weight, uncomfortable. The memory of their argument about the loan was still fresh in his mind. "Look, Isabella, if this is about the other day—" "It's not," she interrupted, then caught herself. "Well, maybe it is, but not in the way you think." She took a deep breath and moved closer, lowering her voice. "What Lily said earlier, about wanting me to be her mother." Ethan's face reddened. "Kids say things. She didn't mean—" "Please, let me finish," Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know it embarrassed you. I know you think I'm trying to buy my way into your lives, but that's not true at all." She glanced over at Lily, who was giggling as she chased her friends around the carousel. "That night at the gala when we danced, it was the first time in years I felt like a real person, not just a bank account with legs." A nearby popcorn machine popped loudly, making them both jump. Isabella used the moment to gather her thoughts, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. "When I'm with you and Lily, I don't feel like Isabella Hartwell, the billionaire heiress everyone wants something from. I'm just Isabella, the woman who burns toast and doesn't know how to work a washing machine." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "The woman who cries at charity galas because she has everything money can buy but nothing that really matters." Ethan's expression softened slightly, but he remained quiet, listening. "I know I handled the loan situation badly," she continued. "I should have talked to you first, but I'm not used to this, to caring about people who don't want my money, to wanting to help and not knowing how." Her voice cracked a little. "I'm asking you, Ethan, let me spend time with you and Lily. Not as someone who can write checks or solve problems with money, but as just me. A woman who's learning what family means, one day at a time." The distant sound of children laughing mixed with the carnival music. Ethan watched Lily, remembering how her face had lit up when Isabella had joined them earlier for rides. "It's not that simple," he said finally, running a hand through his hair. "You live in a different world, Isabella. The minute people find out about us spending time together, they'll start talking. They'll assume things. They'll say I'm after your money, or—" "Let them talk," Isabella interrupted, stepping closer. Her eyes were bright with determination. "I've spent my whole life worried about what people might say or think. It's exhausting, and it's lonely, and I'm tired of it." She reached out hesitantly, touching his arm. "Please, Ethan, I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of something real." The touch of her hand on his arm sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the weather. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the wealthy exterior to the vulnerable woman beneath. He remembered how natural she'd seemed earlier, helping Lily onto the carousel, laughing at the silly faces they made in the funhouse mirrors. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We can try. But no more financial surprises, okay? No trying to fix things with money. If this is going to work, it has to be normal." The smile that broke across Isabella's face was radiant, making her look younger and somehow more real. "Normal," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "I'd like that. And we take it slow," Ethan added, glancing meaningfully at Lily. "She's already lost one mother. I can't let her get hurt again." Isabella nodded solemnly. "I understand. Thank you, Ethan, for giving me a chance." Before either of them could say more, Lily came running over, her cheeks flushed from playing. "Daddy, Miss Isabella, can we get ice cream before we go home, please?" Ethan and Isabella exchanged a look. His cautious, hers hopeful, and in that moment both realized they were stepping into unknown territory. There would be challenges ahead, questions about how to bridge their different worlds, concerns about what others would think. But for now, there was just this: a little girl's request for ice cream, a warm summer evening, and the possibility of something new beginning. "Sure, sweetheart," Ethan said, ruffling Lily's hair. "I think we can manage that." The modest kitchen in Ethan's house glowed with warm yellow light from the old fixture overhead. Isabella stood in the doorway, holding a glass casserole dish wrapped in a checkered cloth. Her designer clothes had been swapped for a simple sweater and jeans, but her hands trembled slightly as she held the dish. "I made it myself," she said, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. "Though I should warn you, it's my first attempt at cooking anything." Ethan raised his eyebrows, unable to hide his surprise. "You've never cooked before?" "We always had staff for that," Isabella admitted, her cheeks flushing. "But I watched some cooking videos online last night. How hard could it be, right?" Lily bounced excitedly around Isabella, her pigtails swinging. "Can I help set the table? Daddy always lets me put out the forks." "Sure, sweetie," Ethan said, watching as Isabella carefully placed the casserole on the counter. The kitchen wasn't anything special: worn linoleum floors, dated cabinets, and a small table with mismatched chairs, but Isabella looked at everything with genuine interest. "This is so cozy," she said, and there wasn't a hint of condescension in her voice. If anything, she sounded wistful. Ethan grabbed some potholders. "Let's see what you've created." Isabella bit her lip as she unwrapped the dish. "It's supposed to be chicken and broccoli casserole." The video made it look simple, but when she lifted the lid, a small cloud of smoke escaped. The top layer was definitely darker than the cooking video had shown, and something had clearly gone wrong with the cheese sauce. It had separated into odd clumps. Isabella's face fell. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. We can order pizza instead." But Ethan was already grabbing a serving spoon. "Hey, my first attempt at cooking after Sarah passed wasn't exactly five-star restaurant quality either." He paused, surprised at himself for mentioning his late wife so casually. "Besides, slightly burnt cheese is just extra flavor." "Extra flavor," Lily echoed, climbing onto her chair. "Like when Daddy makes toast." Isabella laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She watched as Ethan served portions onto their mismatched plates, her eyes following his movements with a mixture of embarrassment and hope. They settled around the small table, knees bumping occasionally in the tight space. Isabella picked up her fork with the careful grace that probably came from years of formal dinners, then paused as she watched Lily dig right in. Lily declared, though Ethan noticed she was mostly eating the less charred bits. "It's yummy, Miss Isabella." "Really?" Isabella took a small bite herself and immediately coughed. "Oh goodness, that's terrible." She covered her mouth, looking mortified. "I'm so sorry. I think I mixed up teaspoons and tablespoons with the salt." Instead of being annoyed, Ethan found himself chuckling. There was something endearing about seeing the usually polished billionaire making such a basic mistake. "Tell you what, how about I teach you some cooking basics? Starting with the difference between measuring spoons." Isabella's eyes lit up. "You'd do that? I mean, I don't want to impose." "Daddy's a good teacher," Lily proclaimed, abandoning her attempt to eat more of the casserole. "He taught me how to tie my shoes and how to make pancakes." "Well, I'm not sure I can live up to Lily's pancake-making skills," Isabella said, finally relaxing enough to laugh at herself. "But I'd like that. I'd like that very much." Ethan got up and opened the fridge. "For tonight, though, I think we've got some leftover spaghetti we can heat up. And maybe some ice cream for dessert?" "Ice cream!" Lily cheered, while Isabella stood up to help clear the plates. As they worked together to reheat the spaghetti, Isabella moved around the kitchen with increasing confidence. She asked Lily to show her where the bowls were kept, listened intently as the little girl explained their system for sorting silverware, and somehow managed to make even paper napkin folding look elegant. The second attempt at dinner went much better. They sat around the table, sharing stories and laughing. Isabella told them about her first disastrous attempt at doing her own laundry in college, which had resulted in all her white clothes turning pink. Lily shared elaborate tales about her adventures at school, complete with dramatic hand gestures that nearly knocked over her milk twice. As the evening wound down, they moved to the small living room. Isabella sat on the worn couch, and Lily immediately climbed up next to her with a storybook. "Can you read to me? Daddy does funny voices for all the characters." "I'm not very good at funny voices," Isabella admitted, but she opened the book anyway. As she began to read, her voice was hesitant at first, but grew more confident with each page. Lily snuggled closer, pointing out her favorite pictures and correcting Isabella whenever she mispronounced a character's name. Ethan watched from his armchair, something warm and unexpected expanding in his chest. The sight of Isabella, who probably owned multiple mansions, sitting contentedly on his second-hand couch, reading a well-worn children's book, struck him as both surreal and somehow exactly right. Gradually, Lily's corrections and giggles became fewer and further between. Her eyes started to droop, and she curled up against Isabella's side. Isabella's voice grew softer, but she kept reading, one hand gently stroking Lily's hair. When Lily finally drifted off completely, Isabella carefully closed the book. She looked down at the sleeping child in her lap with an expression of wonder, as if she'd been given something precious and wasn't quite sure she deserved it. Ethan sat quietly, taking in the scene. The golden lamplight softened Isabella's features, making her look younger, more vulnerable. There was no trace of the polished billionaire now, just a woman holding a sleeping child, belonging exactly where she was. The Saturday morning sun streamed through the dusty windows of Ethan's garage, catching motes of dust that danced in the air. Isabella sat cross-legged on an old blanket spread over the concrete floor. Her designer jeans collecting smudges she didn't seem to mind. Beside her, Lily bounced excitedly, surrounded by cardboard, cotton balls, and colorful paint bottles. "So, what exactly are we making?" Isabella asked, picking up the project instructions with a bemused smile. "A solar system?" Lily declared, waving her arms wide. "Mrs. Thompson says we need all the planets, and the sun, and," she scrunched up her face trying to remember, "asteroids." Ethan worked nearby on a customer's car, the gentle clink of tools providing a steady background rhythm. He couldn't help stealing glances at the scene before him. His daughter and Isabella huddled together over craft supplies, both wearing matching expressions of concentration. "Daddy," Lily called out. "What color should we make Jupiter?" "Orange and brown swirls, sweetie," he answered, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Remember that picture we saw in your science book?" Isabella reached for the orange paint. "Here, let me show you a trick my art teacher taught me." She demonstrated how to swirl colors together with a toothpick, creating realistic-looking patterns on the styrofoam ball they designated as Jupiter. Lily watched in wonder as the planet came to life under Isabella's careful guidance. "You're really good at this," Lily said admiringly. "Did you make lots of science projects when you were little?" A shadow crossed Isabella's face, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Actually, I didn't. My parents were very busy, so I usually had tutors help me with homework." "But who did the fun parts with you?" Lily asked innocently. Isabella's hands stilled on the paint bottle. I guess I didn't really do many fun parts." Ethan set down his wrench, his heart squeezing at the quiet admission. He'd noticed how Isabella sometimes seemed lost in simple domestic moments, as if experiencing them for the first time. "Well, you're doing the fun parts now," Lily declared, dabbing blue paint on Isabella's nose with a giggle. "Lily!" Ethan started to scold, but Isabella's laugh stopped him. It was genuine and free, nothing like the polite chuckle he'd heard at the gala. "You're absolutely right," Isabella said, carefully adding a tiny dot of blue to Lily's nose in return. "And I'm having the best time." They worked together for the next hour, creating a miniature solar system that slowly took shape. Ethan found himself drawn away from his work more and more, pulled into their orbit of laughter and creativity. He helped them hang the planets from wire attached to a wooden board, creating different levels to show depth. "Mercury goes closest to the sun," Lily instructed seriously, pointing to where she wanted each planet. Isabella held up the tiny gray sphere. "It must get pretty hot there." "Not as hot as you make the garage, Dad," Lily teased, and Ethan pretended to look offended. "Hey now," A man needs his workspace warm. It's like 1,000 degrees in here, Isabella agreed with Lily, fanning herself dramatically. See? Miss Isabella knows, Lily said triumphantly. Miss Isabella, is it? Ethan raised an eyebrow. What happened to Pretty Lady? Isabella blushed, remembering Lily's first nickname for her at the fair. I think I've been demoted. Promoted, Lily corrected. Now you're not just pretty, you're my friend, too. The simple statement hung in the air, making Isabella's eyes shine with unexpected tears. She busied herself with the glue bottle, but Ethan caught the emotion on her face. They added the final touches to the project. Stars made from glitter, rings around Saturn crafted from cardboard and aluminum foil, and a bright yellow sun that Lily insisted on adding extra sparkles to. It's perfect, Lily declared, standing back to admire their work. Can we hang it in my room? After it's graded, Ethan promised. But first, I think it's time for lunch. Why don't you go wash up? As Lily skipped away, Isabella began gathering the scattered craft supplies. I should probably get going. Stay for lunch, Ethan found himself saying. It's just sandwiches, nothing fancy, but... He trailed off, suddenly aware of how simple their meals must seem to someone used to five-star restaurants. I'd love to, Isabella said quickly, if you're sure it's not too much trouble. Trouble? Ethan laughed. After you spent your whole morning helping with this project, it's the least we can do. They began cleaning up together, working in comfortable silence. Isabella reached for the glue bottle, just as Ethan did, their hands brushing. Neither pulled away immediately, and Ethan felt a jolt of awareness race through him at the contact. Isabella's fingers were soft against his work-roughened ones, and when he looked up, he found her eyes fixed on their touching hands. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Ethan could feel his heart pounding, could see the slight catch in Isabella's breathing. The spark between them was impossible to ignore, electric and alive in the quiet garage. The bell above Pete's diner jingled as Ethan pushed open the glass door, holding it for Isabella and Lily to enter. The familiar smell of coffee and fresh-baked pie wrapped around them, but something felt different today. The usual warm chatter dimmed to hushed whispers as heads turned their way. Isabella pretended not to notice, smiling warmly at Lily, who was already pointing at the display case full of desserts. Can I have the chocolate cream pie, Daddy, please? After you eat your lunch, sweetheart, Ethan said, trying to ignore the stares as they slid into their favorite corner booth. The vinyl seats squeaked beneath them. Mary, the longtime waitress who had known Ethan since high school, approached their table with 3 menus and an uncertain smile. Her eyes darted between Ethan and Isabella, lingering a moment too long on Isabella's pearl earrings and perfectly tailored blazer. The usual, Ethan? Mary asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. And for your guest? Isabella gracefully opened her menu. Everything looks wonderful. What would you recommend, Mary? The genuine warmth in Isabella's voice seemed to catch Mary off guard. She softened slightly. Well, our meatloaf is pretty famous around here. Been using the same recipe for 30 years. That sounds perfect, Isabella said. I'll have that, please. 2 tables over, Mrs. Henderson and her bridge club weren't even trying to hide their scrutiny. Their whispered comments carried across the diner like autumn leaves in the wind. Living in that mansion, all alone, probably just playing house. Poor Ethan, getting mixed up with. Ethan's jaw tightened. He'd grown up with these people, fixed their cars, helped jump-start their batteries on cold winter mornings. But right now, their judgmental glances made his skin prickle with anger. Isabella touched his hand lightly across the table. The flowers outside are lovely, she said clearly, her voice carrying just enough to interrupt the gossip. Did the garden club plant those? Mrs. Henderson shifted in her seat, suddenly very interested in her coffee cup. Yeah, Lily chimed in, oblivious to the tension. Miss Betty lets me help water them sometimes. She says I have a green thumb, whatever that means. Isabella laughed, the sound genuine and bright. It means you're good with plants, sweetheart. Maybe you could help me with my garden sometime? I have these stubborn roses that just won't bloom. Lily's eyes lit up. Can I, Daddy? Please? Before Ethan could answer, the diner's door chimed again. Frank Wilson, Ethan's oldest friend and fellow mechanic, walked in. His eyes found their table immediately, his expression troubled. Mary returned with their drinks: chocolate milk for Lily, coffee for Ethan, and Earl Grey tea for Isabella. As she set them down, her movements were gentler than before, watching Isabella help Lily arrange her napkin and silverware with motherly patience. "You know," Mary said quietly, "we've got a fresh batch of cookies coming out of the oven in about 10 minutes. Would you folks like some brought over when they're ready?" "That would be wonderful," Isabella replied. "Thank you, Mary." Frank approached their table, wiping his grease-stained hands on his work pants. "Ethan, got a minute? Need to ask you about that transmission order." Ethan knew that look. There was no transmission order. He squeezed Isabella's hand apologetically. "Be right back." Outside, the autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Frank leaned against the brick wall, crossing his arms. "What are you doing, Ethan?" he asked without preamble. "Having lunch with my daughter and Isabella," Ethan replied evenly. "You know what I mean." Frank glanced through the window where Isabella was showing Lily how to make a paper boat out of her placemat. "She's not like us, man. She's got more money than this whole town combined. People are talking. Let them talk. I'm just saying, be careful. Remember Jenny Carson in high school, dating that rich kid from Cedar Grove? He was just exploring the simple life before heading off to college. Left her heartbroken." Ethan's voice grew quiet but firm. "She's not what they think." "How do you know that?" Frank pressed. Through the window, Ethan watched as Isabella helped Lily wipe spilled chocolate milk, not caring that drops splashed onto her expensive blouse. He saw how she listened intently to Lily's rambling story about school, asking questions that made his daughter beam with importance. He remembered her tears in the empty ballroom, her whispered plea for family, and all the small moments since then, helping with homework, learning to use his ancient coffee maker, sitting on his worn couch sharing take-out Chinese food and laughing at old movies. "Because I see her," Ethan said simply. "Not the mansion, not the bank account. Her." He turned to face his friend. "She's not what they think, Frank. She's just someone looking for home, same as anybody else." Inside the diner, Lily's delighted giggle rang out as Isabella's paper boat successfully floated in her water glass. The sound seemed to cut through the whispers and stares, pure and true as a bell. Mary appeared at their table with a plate of warm cookies, setting them down with a genuine smile this time. One by one, the other diners returned to their own conversations, their curiosity giving way to the ordinary rhythm of small-town life. And in their corner booth, a billionaire heiress and a little girl continued to float paper boats, while outside, a mechanic defended something that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The small-town community picnic transformed the park into a magical wonderland as dusk settled in. Hundreds of twinkling string lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow on the gathered families below. The sweet scent of barbecue and fresh-cut grass mingled in the early evening air. Isabella stood at the edge of the crowd, her simple sundress a far cry from her usual designer attire. She watched as children chased fireflies and elderly couples sat in lawn chairs, tapping their feet to the live band's gentle music. Her hands fidgeted with the paper plate she held, still nervous about fitting in despite the weeks she'd spent getting to know the townspeople. "You came!" Lily's excited voice rang out as she ran up to Isabella, nearly knocking over her lemonade. "Daddy said you might be too busy, but I knew you'd come." Isabella's face lit up as she knelt to hug the little girl. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." "Isabella." Mrs. Peterson, the town librarian, waved from the dessert table. "Come try my apple cobbler. It's an old family recipe." Taking a deep breath, Isabella made her way over. More voices called out to her. Genuine, welcoming voices. Mr. Johnson wanted her opinion on his garden tomatoes. Sarah, from the diner, insisted she try her famous potato salad. These were the same people who had whispered about her weeks ago, but something had changed. They'd seen her helping at the library's reading hour, teaching kids about butterflies. They'd watched her laugh at her own mistakes while learning to make pies at the church bake sale. The untouchable billionaire had become simply Isabella, the woman who always had time to listen, who brought soup when someone was sick, who never forgot a child's birthday. Ethan watched from across the lawn, his heart swelling at the sight of Isabella surrounded by townspeople, her genuine laugh mixing with theirs. She belonged here now, in this simple celebration of community and connection. The string lights caught the natural highlights in her hair, making her glow like something from a dream. The band shifted to a slower song, one of those timeless melodies that seemed made for summer evenings and tender moments. Ethan found himself walking toward her, drawn by something stronger than thought. "May I have this dance?" he asked softly, extending his hand. Isabella's eyes widened slightly, but her hand slipped into his without hesitation. As he led her to the makeshift dance floor, really just a patch of grass cleared between picnic blankets, the crowd's attention shifted to them. But this time, the watching eyes held warmth instead of judgment. Ethan's hand settled gently on her waist as they began to sway. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through both of them. Isabella's free hand rested on his shoulder, and she could feel the solid strength beneath his cotton shirt. "You know," she whispered, "I used to attend fancy galas almost every weekend, but I never felt as comfortable as I do right here." Ethan pulled her a little closer, their movements perfectly in sync. "That's because this is real. No pretense, no expectations, just people sharing their lives." They turned slowly, under the canopy of lights. Old Mr. Wilson nodded approvingly from his chair. Little Tommy from Lily's class made exaggerated gagging faces at all the mushy stuff until his mother shushed him, and Lily watched from beside Mrs. Peterson, her eyes shining with hope and joy. "I never thought I could have this," Isabella admitted, her voice barely audible above the music. "Growing up, everything was about appearances, about maintaining the family image. I watched other families at parks and restaurants, seeing how they really talked to each other, really listened. I wanted that so badly." Ethan's hand tightened slightly on hers. "I know what you mean. After Lily's mother died, I thought that kind of connection was over for me. I focused everything on being a good dad, on keeping our little world stable." The music continued, wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Other couples had joined them on the grass, but Ethan and Isabella remained in their own world, moving together as if they'd danced 1,000 times before. "But then you walked into that empty ballroom?" Ethan continued, his voice growing thick with emotion. "And somehow you saw past the waiter's uniform to the real me. You trusted me with your tears that night." Isabella's eyes glistened in the string lights. "And you saw past all the zeros in my bank account to the lonely woman who just wanted to belong somewhere." They danced in comfortable silence for a moment, letting the music and the warm evening air fill the space between them. The scent of jasmine from nearby bushes drifted by, mixing with the homey smells of the picnic. Ethan looked down at their joined hands, at the way they fit together so naturally. He thought about how she'd become such a constant presence in their lives, helping Lily with homework, bringing surprise lunches to his shop, simply being there with her quiet strength and genuine care. The realization that had been building in his heart for weeks finally found its way to his lips. He slowed their dance to almost a stop, making sure she could see the truth in his eyes as he spoke. "You don't feel like a stranger anymore," he said softly, his voice full of wonder and certainty. "You feel like family." The words hung in the air between them, precious and perfect, as they continued their dance under the twinkling lights. The morning after the picnic dawned bright and clear. Isabella arrived at Ethan's house carrying 2 paper cups from the local coffee shop, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She knocked softly, and Ethan opened the door, already dressed in his work clothes. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering him a cup. "It's just regular coffee black, like you always drink it." His fingers brushed hers as he took the cup, and a warm smile spread across his face. "You remembered." "Morning, Isabella," Lily called from the kitchen table, where she sat surrounded by scattered crayons and paper. "I'm drawing our picnic from yesterday." Isabella settled into what had become her usual chair, peering at Lily's artwork. "Is that me in the purple dress?" "Uh-huh. And look," Lily pointed with her crayon. "That's Daddy dancing with you under all the pretty lights." Ethan watched them from the doorway, sipping his coffee. The scene before him felt so natural, Isabella helping Lily choose the right color for the string lights, both of them giggling over the stick figures holding hands. His chest tightened with an emotion he wasn't ready to name. Later that afternoon, they all worked together in the backyard. The old wooden swing set needed repairs, and Isabella insisted on helping despite having never held a wrench before. No, you're turning it the wrong way, Ethan laughed, reaching around her to guide her hands. Righty-tighty, lefty, loosey. That makes absolutely no sense, Isabella protested, but she leaned back against him slightly, allowing him to show her the correct motion. The warmth of his chest against her back made her cheeks flush. Lily swung her legs impatiently from her perch on the porch steps. "Is it fixed yet? I want to show Isabella how high I can go." "Almost there, Princess," Ethan called back. "Just one more bolt to tighten." The days began to follow a gentle pattern. Isabella would arrive in the mornings, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with fresh pastries from the bakery. She learned to pack school lunches alongside Ethan, figured out that Lily preferred her sandwiches cut diagonally, and discovered the joy of reading bedtime stories complete with silly voices. One Wednesday afternoon, Ethan came home from the auto shop to find Isabella and Lily covered in flour, the kitchen a disaster zone. "We're making cookies," Lily announced proudly, her face streaked with chocolate. "I can see that," Ethan chuckled, taking in the scene. "Looks like you're wearing more ingredients than you're baking." Isabella wiped her hands on her apron, a cheerful floral print she'd bought specially for these occasions. "I may have underestimated the complexity of your mother's recipe. Here," Ethan said, moving behind her at the counter. "The trick is to cream the butter and sugar first." His hands covered hers as they worked the mixer together, and Isabella felt her heart skip. The simple moments began to stack up like precious gems. Teaching Lily to plant marigolds in the garden, playing board games on rainy afternoons, walking to the ice cream parlor after dinner, Lily between them, holding both their hands and swinging herself forward. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, they sat together on the porch swing. The crickets chirped their evening symphony, and a cool breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. "I never knew it could be like this," Isabella said softly, her shoulder touching Ethan's as they swayed gently. "Like what?" "So normal, so peaceful." She traced patterns on the arm of the swing with her finger. "Growing up, everything was about appearances and expectations. We had staff to do everything, cooking, cleaning, even playing with us. I never knew what I was missing until now." Ethan watched her profile in the gathering dusk. "And what were you missing?" "This. All of it. The mess of baking cookies, the satisfaction of fixing something with your own hands. Hearing Lily laugh when we chase butterflies." She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Being part of a real family." The swing creaked softly as they sat in comfortable silence. A moth fluttered around the porch light, casting dancing shadows. Isabella's hand found Ethan's, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I love this life," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the evening sounds. She hesitated for a moment before adding, "And maybe, I love you too." Ethan's heart thundered in his chest. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, and a smile tugged at his lips, but he remained silent, too afraid to break the delicate magic of the moment with words. They continued swaying together as night settled around them, their joined hands saying everything their voices couldn't yet express. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a text message. Ethan was under a car at his shop when his phone buzzed repeatedly. He slid out, wiping his greasy hands on a rag, and checked the screen. 6 messages from different friends, all with the same link. His stomach dropped when he clicked it. There, splashed across the screen of the city's biggest gossip website, were photos of him and Isabella, dancing at the picnic, having coffee together, playing with Lily at the park. The headline made him feel sick. "Billionaire's new boy toy. Small-town mechanic strikes gold." The article was cruel, painting him as a calculating single father who had wormed his way into Isabella's life. They dug up everything: his wife's death, his financial struggles, even the mysteriously paid-off loan. The shop phone rang. Ethan answered it mechanically. "Mr. Miller?" It was one of his biggest clients, a local car dealership owner. "I'm sorry, but we'll be taking our business elsewhere." "What? Why?" Ethan gripped the phone tighter. "We've worked together for years. Can't risk the association. You understand." The line went dead. By lunchtime, 3 more clients had canceled. His phone kept buzzing with messages. Some sympathetic, others accusatory. Old friends questioned his motives. The town's whispers had turned into shouts. When he picked up Lily from school, she was quiet. Too quiet. "Baby, what's wrong?" he asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. Lily's bottom lip trembled. "Tommy said you're only nice to Miss Isabella because she's rich." And Sarah said. She hiccuped. "Sarah said you're trying to steal money from her." Ethan's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "That's not true, sweetheart." "I know, Daddy." Lily's voice was small. "But they wouldn't play with me at recess. They said their parents told them to stay away from me." The pain in her voice cut through him like a knife. This was exactly what he'd feared, his daughter suffering because of his choices. At home, more calls came. The local parts supplier who'd always given him good rates now wanted payment up front. The diner owner who used to chat with him now looked away when he walked past. Isabella called twice, but he let it go to voicemail. He couldn't deal with her right now. Not when his whole world was crumbling. Around dinner time, she showed up at his door. She looked different, worried, vulnerable. Nothing like the polished heiress in the tabloid photos. "Ethan, please," she said before he could speak. "We need to talk about this. My PR team can handle it. We can release a statement." "A statement?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Like I'm some kind of... what? Your charity case? Your project?" "No. You know that's not what this island..." Isabella reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Do I?" His voice was rough. "Because right now, everything they're saying feels true. I'm just a mechanic, Isabella. A nobody who got too close to your world." "Stop it," she whispered. "You're everything to me. You and Lily both." From inside, they heard a sniffle. Lily stood in the hallway, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "Why are people being mean?" she asked. "Is it because of us, Daddy?" Isabella moved to comfort her. But Ethan stepped between them. All the fear, all the anger of the day crystallized into a hard knot in his chest. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he said, his voice shaking. "Your world, it's poison. Everything it touches turns ugly. These people, they were my friends, they trusted me. Now they look at me like I'm some kind of con man." "We can fix this," Isabella pleaded. "Together, we can." "No." Ethan's voice was final. "I won't let Lily grow up being whispered about, being treated like she's different. I won't let her lose her childhood because of this." Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks. "Please don't do this. Please don't push me away." Ethan picked up Lily, who buried her face in his neck. He looked at Isabella, and for a moment, all the love they'd built showed in his eyes, along with all the pain. "Your world destroys everything it touches," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I can't let Lily suffer for this." He turned away, carrying Lily inside. The last thing he saw was Isabella standing on his porch, her hands pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Then he closed the door, and the sound seemed to echo through his empty house like a final goodbye. The autumn wind scattered leaves across Ethan's driveway as he mechanically went through his morning routine. Coffee, toast, pack Lily's lunch. The silence in the kitchen felt heavier than before when it had just been the two of them. Now the empty chair at their small table seemed to mock him. 5 days had passed since he'd walked away from Isabella. 5 days of forcing smiles and dodging questions from concerned neighbors. The newspaper sat untouched on his counter, its harsh headlines still visible, even though he'd folded it face down. Billionaire's boy toy, the mechanic who almost had it all. At work, Ethan buried himself in engines and oil changes. The rhythm of tools against metal helped drown out his thoughts. 3 more clients had canceled their appointments this week. The whispers followed him everywhere, at the grocery store, at Lily's school, even at church. "Just doing what's best for Lily," he muttered to himself as he tightened a bolt with more force than necessary. The wrench slipped, and he scraped his knuckles. The sharp pain was almost welcome. It gave him something else to focus on besides the ache in his chest. Across town, behind the iron gates of her estate, Isabella wandered through empty rooms like a ghost. Her usually impeccable appearance had crumbled, designer clothes replaced by soft sweaters, perfectly styled hair now in a messy ponytail. The house staff exchanged worried glances as she picked at her meals and spent hours staring out windows. She found herself in the kitchen, where, just 2 weeks ago, she'd attempted to make chocolate chip cookies with Lily. The memory of flour-covered counters and giggles felt like a dream now. Isabella touched the cookbook they'd used, still marked with tiny fingerprints. "Miss Hartwell," her assistant said gently from the doorway. "The board meeting starts in an hour." "Cancel it," Isabella replied, her voice hollow. "Cancel everything this week." In her study, business papers lay forgotten as she picked up the crayon drawing Lily had given her, 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "My family," Lily had written in wobbly letters. Isabella's tears smudged the corner of the paper. Back at his house, Ethan tried to maintain normalcy for Lily's sake. But his daughter's perceptive eyes missed nothing. During dinner, she pushed her peas around her plate. "Jenny said her mom saw you in the paper," Lily said quietly. "She said mean things about you and Isabella." Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "People sometimes say things they shouldn't, sweetheart. But why can't Isabella come over anymore? She helped me with my math homework better than you do." The innocent observation hit him like a punch to the gut. Sometimes, grown-ups need space from each other. Like when I need space from Tommy at recess when he's being annoying? Despite everything, Ethan couldn't help but smile slightly. "Not exactly, honey." The days dragged on. Isabella's absence left gaps in their lives that Ethan hadn't realized she'd filled. No more surprise lunch visits with Lily's favorite sandwiches. No more weekend trips to the park where Isabella would push Lily on the swings, her laugh mixing with his daughter's. No more quiet moments in the evening when they'd sit on his porch, talking about everything and nothing. He caught himself reaching for his phone dozens of times a day, muscle memory trying to text her about funny things Lily said, or share pictures of particularly challenging repairs at the shop. Each time, he'd stop himself, remembering the reporters who'd ambushed him outside work, the cruel comments online, the way Lily had come home crying because classmates called her dad a money grabber. At her mansion, Isabella sat in her home theater, the room where they'd had their first movie night together. Lily had insisted on The Little Mermaid and fallen asleep between them. Now the massive screen stayed dark, and Isabella hugged her knees to her chest. Her phone showed dozens of missed calls from her publicity team, all wanting to manage the situation. But how could they manage a broken heart? The tabloids painted her as either a fool or a victim, and Ethan as either a con man or a gold digger. None of them saw the truth. How he'd refused her help with his business loans, how he'd insisted on paying his own way every time they went out, how he'd taught her the simple joy of making pancakes on Sunday mornings. That evening, as Ethan went through Lily's bedtime routine, his movements felt mechanical. Bath time, pajamas, teeth brushing, story. He tucked the blanket around her, just like always. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice stopped him as he reached for the light switch. "Yes, sweetheart? You're sad again." Her words were simple, but hit him with devastating accuracy. "She made you smile. Real smiles, not the pretend ones." Ethan sat heavily on the edge of her bed, his throat tight. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes love wasn't enough? That sometimes the world could be cruel to people who dared to cross its invisible lines? "I miss her stories," Lily continued sleepily. "And her hugs. She gave good hugs, even if she was scared to hug back at first." Ethan's heart twisted. He remembered how stiff Isabella had been during their first hug, as if she'd forgotten how she'd gradually learned to relax into their embraces, to accept affection without questioning its price. "Go to sleep, honey," he whispered, kissing her forehead. But as he sat there in the dim glow of Lily's nightlight, watching his daughter drift off to sleep, Ethan felt torn between his instinct to protect his family and the undeniable truth in Lily's words. The pretend smiles, the hollow laughter, the mechanical motions of living, they all pointed to what he'd been trying to deny. In pushing Isabella away to protect Lily from the world's cruelty, had he actually taken away something his daughter needed? Something they both needed? The autumn sunlight streamed through Lily's bedroom window as she sat cross-legged on her pink carpet, surrounded by crayons and construction paper. Her small hands moved with determination across the page, carefully selecting each color with the kind of serious concentration only a 7-year-old could muster. "The sky needs to be extra blue," she mumbled to herself, reaching for her favorite crayon. "And lots of hearts. Daddy says hearts mean love." On the paper, 3 stick figures took shape. A tall one wearing mechanic's clothes, a smaller one with pigtails, and between them a figure in a pretty dress. Lily drew their hands linked together, just like they had been at the picnic. Above them, she carefully added a giant rainbow, using every color in her crayon box. Mr. Whiskers, her stuffed cat, sat propped against her bed as her sole audience. "Do you think she'll like it?" Lily asked him seriously. The toy's button eyes seemed to twinkle in response. Down the hall, she could hear her father in his home office, probably doing more paperwork. He'd been doing that a lot lately, and his smile had gone missing again, just like after Mommy went to heaven. Lily didn't like it when Daddy's smile disappeared. She reached for a fresh sheet of paper and with painstaking care began to write. Her teacher said her handwriting was improving and this letter had to be perfect. She sounded out each word carefully as she wrote, "Dear Isabella, please don't go. Daddy smiles when you're here. Love, Lily." She folded both papers carefully and slipped them into an envelope from her father's desk. The address wasn't hard to find. Everyone knew where the big Hartwell mansion was. Lily had been there once, when Isabella had invited them for cookies in her garden. Sneaking downstairs, she found Mrs. Peterson from next door watering her roses. The kind, elderly neighbor had always helped mail Lily's letters to Santa. Surely she would help with this important mission, too. "Mrs. Peterson," Lily whispered, though her father was too far away to hear. "Can you help me mail something? It's really important." The old woman's eyes crinkled with understanding as she took the envelope. "Of course, sweetheart. Is this for your friend Isabella?" Lily nodded solemnly. "It's a special drawing. To make her come back." Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. She had watched the whole town drama unfold and had seen how happy both Ethan and Lily had been during those precious weeks with Isabella. "I'll make sure it gets there today, dear." Across town, in the echoing halls of Hartwell Mansion, Isabella sat in her study, staring unseeingly at business reports. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadows that matched her mood. Her phone lay silent. She'd stopped checking it for messages that wouldn't come. The butler's gentle knock startled her. "Miss Hartwell, there's a letter for you." Isabella barely glanced up. "Just add it to the pile, James. It's from the Miller residence, miss." Her head snapped up, heart suddenly racing. "From Ethan? The return address suggests it's from young Miss Lily, actually." Isabella's hands trembled as she took the envelope. The childish handwriting on the front made her throat tight. Opening it carefully, she pulled out the drawing first, and her composure crumbled. There they were, the 3 of them, holding hands under a rainbow. Lily had drawn Isabella's dress in her favorite blue color, the same as the one she'd worn to the picnic. There were hearts floating everywhere, and at the bottom, Lily had carefully printed, "My family." The note fell out next, those simple words hitting her like a physical blow. "Please don't go. Daddy smiles when you're here." Isabella pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling onto the drawing. She thought of all the times she'd watched Ethan's face light up when Lily made a joke, or when they'd worked together on that science project, or during their dance under the string lights. She remembered how his genuine smile had made her feel more real than all her years of society gatherings. Moving to the window, Isabella pushed the heavy curtains aside. Sunlight flooded the room, and she looked out at the manicured gardens that had never felt like home. She thought of the cluttered, loving warmth of the Miller's kitchen, of Lily's infectious giggle, of Ethan's gentle strength. Her whole life, she'd run from emotional risk, hiding behind wealth and walls. When things got complicated, she'd simply moved on, changed cities, started fresh. It was what her parents had taught her. When things get messy, retreat to safety. But safety wasn't living. Safety hadn't given her Lily's bear hugs or Ethan's honest laughter. Safety was just another word for loneliness. Isabella sank into her chair, holding the drawing close to her heart. Tears fell freely now, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time in weeks, she felt clarity cutting through the fog of fear and hurt. The town's whispers, the tabloid headlines, the social media frenzy. None of it mattered. What mattered was a little girl who saw her as family, and a man who had shown her what real love looked like, even if he was too hurt right now to remember it himself. Looking at the Crayon family holding hands under their rainbow, Isabella made her decision. No more running. No more hiding. No more letting fear of judgment dictate her happiness. She was Isabella Hartwell, and she had finally found something worth fighting for. The community center buzzed with whispers as Isabella stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly against the wooden surface. She had called this meeting on short notice, and nearly everyone in town had shown up, their faces a mix of curiosity and judgment. Some wore openly hostile expressions, while others simply looked confused about why the reclusive billionaire would summon them all here. Isabella smoothed her simple blue dress, deliberately chosen instead of her usual designer wear. Her heart hammered in her chest as she noticed familiar faces from the diner, the grocery store, and other places where she'd started to feel at home during her time with Ethan and Lily. Now they all stared at her like she was a stranger again. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaky at first. The microphone caught her nervous swallow. I know there have been many rumors and headlines about my relationship with Ethan Miller." The crowd stirred at the mention of his name. Isabella caught sight of Mrs. Peterson, Lily's teacher, who had always been kind to her. The woman's face now held disappointment instead of warmth. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by wealth," Isabella continued, gripping the podium tighter. "But I never knew what real richness meant until I spent time in your community, until I sat at Ethan's kitchen table and helped Lily with her homework." She paused, fighting back tears. "The headlines you've read, they're wrong. Completely wrong. Ethan Miller never once asked me for money. In fact, when I tried to help him financially, he was angry. He told me he didn't want my charity, he wanted his dignity." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Isabella saw Bob from the hardware store, who had canceled his auto repair contract with Ethan, look down at his hands. "The truth is," Isabella's voice grew stronger, "I was the one who pursued this relationship. I was the lonely one who saw something precious in that family. Do you know what Ethan did when he first met me? He found me crying alone at my own charity gala and offered to dance with me. Not because I was Isabella Hartwell the billionaire, but because I was just another human being who looked sad." The room fell silent. Isabella could see some of the harder expressions beginning to soften. "I know what you all must think. Poor little rich girl, playing at having a normal life. But that's not what this was." She reached into her pocket and pulled out Lily's drawing, holding it up. "This arrived at my house yesterday. Lily drew it. Her father, and me. A family." Her voice cracked as she continued. "I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who only wanted my money. But Ethan, he taught me how to change a tire. He let me burn dinner in his kitchen and didn't laugh at me. He showed me what it means to work hard and take pride in honest work." Several people were nodding now, especially those who knew Ethan well. "I made mistakes," Isabella admitted, wiping at her eyes. "I tried to fix things with money because that's all I knew. But Ethan taught me that some things, like dignity and trust, are worth more than any amount in my bank account." She straightened her shoulders, looking directly at the crowd. "So, I'm standing here today to tell you the truth. If you want to judge someone, judge me. I'm the one who fell in love with a kind, hard-working man who never asked for anything except to be respected for who he island. I'm the one who was blessed enough to be welcomed into a home where love meant more than luxury." Mrs. Johnson, who ran the local bakery, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Several others were showing similar signs of emotion. "Your community welcomed me, showed me what it means to belong somewhere real. And then those horrible headlines hurt not just me but a good man who never deserved any of this." Isabella's voice grew passionate. "Ethan Miller is the most honest person I've ever met. He works harder than anyone I know. And he taught his daughter values that all the money in the world couldn't buy." She took a deep breath. "So I'm asking you, not as a billionaire, but as someone who has grown to love this town and its people, please don't punish Ethan for my presence in his life. If you want to whisper about someone, whisper about the wealthy woman who finally learned what true richness means, thanks to a single dad and his beautiful daughter." The silence in the room was deafening. Isabella stood there, vulnerable and exposed, her heart on display for everyone to see. She noticed old Mr. Roberts, who had been in town longer than anyone, studying her intently from his seat in the front row. Then, Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who ran the library where Lily spent so many afternoons, slowly stood up. Her weathered hands came together in a deliberate clap. The sound echoed through the quiet room like a starting signal. One by one, others joined in. The applause built slowly at first, then gained momentum. Soon the entire hall was filled with the sound of clapping hands and murmurs of support. Isabella saw smiles replacing frowns, nods of understanding where there had been suspicion. The hard shell of judgment that had surrounded the town began to crack, replaced by the warmth she had first fallen in love with. Through her tears, Isabella watched as her honest words bridged the gap between her world and theirs, proving that sometimes the Dumaya reveries have a rever my less. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the open garage door of Ethan's auto shop. The familiar scents of motor oil and metal filled the air as Isabella stepped carefully inside, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. Ethan stood at his workbench, his back to her, methodically organizing his tools with the precision she had come to know so well. He must have heard her footsteps, but he didn't turn around. His shoulders tensed, though, betraying his awareness of her presence. The silence between them felt heavy, loaded with unspoken words and hurt feelings. "Ethan," Isabella said softly, her voice barely carrying over the distant sound of traffic. He continued arranging his wrenches, each one placed with deliberate care. "Shop's closed," he said, his voice flat and professional. "We open at 8 tomorrow." Isabella took another step forward, her hands clasped tightly together. "I just came from the town hall meeting. I told them everything. The truth about us." This made him pause, his hand hovering over a socket wrench. "There is no us anymore," he said, but his voice wavered slightly. "You should go." "I can't," Isabella replied, moving closer. "Not until you look at me." Ethan's hands gripped the edge of the workbench, his knuckles white. After a long moment he turned, and Isabella's heart ached at the weariness in his face. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual warm expression had been replaced by carefully constructed walls. "What do you want from me?" he asked, crossing his arms. "Haven't we hurt each other enough?" Isabella reached into her purse and pulled out Lily's drawing. The paper was slightly crumpled from how tightly she'd held it during her speech. She smoothed it out carefully before holding it up. "Lily sent this to me," she said. "Look at it, please." Ethan's facade cracked slightly at the mention of his daughter. His eyes moved to the drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, drawn with the pure heart of a child who saw love in its simplest form. "She wrote something too," Isabella continued, her voice soft as she turned the paper over to reveal Lily's messy handwriting. "Please don't go. Daddy smiles when you're here." Ethan's breath caught audibly. He uncrossed his arms, one hand reaching out before dropping back to his side. "Isabella!" "She believes in us," Isabella said, taking another step closer. "Do you?" The question hung in the air between them. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Isabella knew meant he was struggling with his emotions. "It's not that simple," he said finally. "Why not?" Isabella challenged gently. "Why can't it be?" "Because," Ethan's voice rose suddenly, echoing off the garage walls. "Because you're you, and I'm me, and this whole town thinks I'm after your money, and my daughter is getting bullied at school, and everything I've built is falling apart." Isabella didn't back away from his outburst. Instead, she placed the drawing carefully on his workbench and met his gaze steadily. "I told the whole town today that you're the most honest man I've ever known, that you taught me what real richness means, that you never once asked me for anything except respect." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "You did?" "I did," she confirmed. "And you know what? They listened." Mrs. Thompson stood up first. "You know how she always saves the new mystery books for Lily?" She started clapping. Then Mr. Roberts joined in, and soon the whole room was applauding. "That doesn't change who we are," Ethan said, but his voice had lost its edge. "You're still a billionaire, and I'm still just a mechanic." Isabella stepped forward again, close enough now to smell the familiar scent of his soap mixed with motor oil. "No," she said firmly. "I'm just a woman who fell in love with a kind, hard-working man who taught her how to change a tire and didn't laugh when she burned dinner." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "That casserole was pretty bad." "Terrible," Isabella agreed, her own lips curving up. "But you ate it anyway. And Lily asked for seconds just to make me feel better." "She adores you," Ethan admitted quietly. "I adore her too," Isabella said. "And her father, who's too stubborn to admit that maybe, just maybe, love is more important than pride." Ethan's carefully constructed walls were crumbling. She could see it in the way his shoulders slumped, in how his eyes softened when they met hers. "I was trying to protect her," he whispered. "To protect myself." "I know," Isabella said gently. "But sometimes protection looks like letting love in, even when it's scary, even when it doesn't make sense on paper." She watched as emotions played across his face. Fear, longing, hope, and something deeper that made her heart race. His hands twitched at his sides, and she could see him fighting against the urge to reach for her. "The headlines," he started, but Isabella cut him off. "Don't matter," she said firmly. "What matters is this." She picked up Lily's drawing again. "What matters is that your daughter sees what you're too afraid to admit, that we're better together than apart." Ethan's eyes fixed on the drawing, on those three simple stick figures holding hands. A tear slipped down his cheek, catching him by surprise. He wiped it away quickly, but more followed. "I miss you," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of us do. The house feels empty without you burning things in the kitchen or helping Lily with her homework or," he swallowed hard, "or making me smile." Isabella felt her own eyes welling up. "Then stop fighting it," she whispered. "Stop protecting yourself from happiness." Ethan's resolve finally shattered completely. With a sound that was half sob, half laugh, he reached for her, pulling her into his arms. Isabella melted into his embrace, her hands gripping the back of his work shirt as he held her tight against his chest. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me." Isabella pressed closer, feeling his heart beating rapidly against her cheek. After weeks of separation, of pain and loneliness, being in his arms felt like coming home. The smell of motor oil, the rough texture of his work clothes, the strength of his embrace, it was all wonderfully, perfectly Ethan. The grand ballroom buzzed with activity as townspeople streamed through its ornate doors. This time, there were no reserved sections, no VIP tables, just neighbors coming together as equals. Isabella stood near the entrance, greeting everyone with genuine warmth, her elegant blue dress catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. Lily twirled nearby in her new party dress, showing it off to anyone who would look. "Daddy helped me pick it," she announced proudly to Mrs. Thompson, who smiled and patted her head. "And a fine choice he made," Mrs. Thompson replied, winking at Ethan, who stood slightly behind his daughter, looking surprisingly comfortable in his tailored suit. The transformation of the hall was remarkable. Instead of the stark, formal atmosphere of previous galas, the space felt welcoming and alive. Round tables dotted with wildflower centerpieces filled the room. String lights draped from the ceiling created a warm, intimate glow that softened the ballroom's grandeur. "The mechanics' table is right next to the mayor's," Isabella explained to Mr. Roberts, who looked pleased. "I thought it was time we stopped pretending some tables are better than others." Ethan watched her with pride as she moved through the crowd. She'd spent weeks planning this event, determined to make it different from all the stuffy charity galas that came before. The invitation had read simply, "Come as you are. Your presence is the only gift required." "Isabella!" Lily called out, running to her with excitement. "Can we help put out the name cards?" "Of course, sweetheart," Isabella replied, bending down to her level. "Why don't you and Daddy handle the left side of the room while I take the right?" As they worked together, Ethan couldn't help but notice how natural it felt, the three of them, moving in sync, sharing smiles across the room, belonging together. Isabella had traded her usual event planner for this personal touch, insisting on arranging everything themselves. The kitchen staff emerged with trays of food that made everyone's eyes widen. Instead of the usual fancy fare, there were comfort foods elevated with simple elegance: mac and cheese with truffle, gourmet sliders, and homemade pies from the local diner. "This is real food," someone exclaimed appreciatively, and laughter rippled through the gathering crowd. Mr. Chen from the hardware store approached Ethan, clapping him on the shoulder. "You've got yourself a special one there," he said, nodding toward Isabella. "Never thought I'd see the day when the Hartwell Gala would serve my wife's apple pie." "She insisted on it," Ethan replied, smiling. "Said it was the best pie she'd ever tasted." The local band, usually relegated to playing at the town square on weekends, set up their instruments on stage. Their familiar faces brought another touch of home to the grand setting. Soon, the sound of their music, a mix of classics and modern songs, filled the air. As evening settled in, the atmosphere grew even warmer. People moved between tables freely, sharing stories and laughs. Isabella had arranged the seating to mix different groups together, breaking down the invisible barriers that had long divided the town. Lily darted between the tables, playing with other children who had never before been invited to such an event. Their laughter echoed off the high ceilings, adding a joyful soundtrack to the evening. "Remember last time we were here?" Isabella asked softly, appearing at Ethan's side. "Just the two of us in an empty room?" Ethan turned to face her, taking in how the gentle lighting made her eyes sparkle. "How could I forget? You were crying." "And you were brave enough to ask me to dance?" she replied, reaching for his hand. "Even though I probably looked like a mess." "You looked beautiful," he corrected her. "Sad but beautiful. Just like now, except—" He touched her cheek gently. "Now you're smiling." The band shifted into a slow song, the same one that had been playing during their first dance. Isabella's eyes widened in recognition. "You remembered. I asked them to play it," Ethan admitted. "Thought it was fitting." Around them, other couples moved onto the dance floor, but Ethan and Isabella remained where they stood, lost in the memory of that stormy night that had changed everything. "You know what's different this time?" Isabella asked, gesturing to the room full of happy faces. "We're not alone anymore." As if on cue, Lily appeared between them, taking both their hands. "Dance with me," she insisted, and they couldn't refuse. The three of them swayed together, Lily standing on Ethan's feet while holding Isabella's hand. Other townspeople watched with fond smiles, seeing not a billionaire and a mechanic, but simply a family. Mrs. Thompson dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "Now that's what I call real wealth," she commented to no one in particular. As the song drew to a close, Lily yawned dramatically. "I'm tired," she announced. "Can I go sit with Mrs. Thompson for a bit?" Ethan nodded, watching as his daughter skipped away, leaving him alone with Isabella on the dance floor. The band began another slow song, and this time, when Ethan pulled Isabella close, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty between them. "Look at what you've created here," he murmured, gesturing to the room full of happy faces. "You've brought the whole town together." Isabella shook her head slightly. "We created this," she corrected him. "You and Lily showed me what really matters. Money can't buy belonging. It can only come from love." They moved together perfectly in sync, as if they'd been dancing together for years instead of months. The light caught the simple silver bracelet on Isabella's wrist, a gift from Lily, and made it shine as brightly as any diamond. "I was so scared that night," Isabella confessed quietly. "Scared of being alone, scared of never finding real love, and then you walked up to me, offering a dance and your umbrella, and suddenly I wasn't scared anymore." Ethan's arms tightened around her waist. "I was terrified," he admitted with a soft laugh. "Here was this incredible woman crying alone in a ballroom, and all I could think to do was ask her to dance. It was perfect. Isabella whispered. It was exactly what I needed. The music swelled around them, and other couples continued to dance, but for Ethan and Isabella, the moment felt intensely private. He looked into her eyes, seeing all the love and trust they'd built together, all the obstacles they'd overcome. Ethan pulled her closer, his lips near her ear as he whispered, "This time, let's not stop." The grand ballroom glowed with warmth, transformed from the cold, empty space where Ethan and Isabella had first danced. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light across polished floors, and cheerful chatter filled every corner. The whole town had come dressed in their finest, some in well-worn suits, and others in borrowed dresses, but all wearing genuine smiles. Isabella stood near the refreshment table in a simple blue evening gown, helping Mrs. Johnson from the bakery arrange cookies on a silver platter. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she laughed at something the older woman said. Gone was the lonely billionaire who had sat crying in this very hall months ago. Ethan watched her from across the room, tugging at his tie. He still felt a bit out of place in the borrowed tuxedo, but the way Isabella's eyes lit up when she saw him made any discomfort worth it. His daughter Lily bounced beside him in her favorite party dress, her patent leather shoes clicking against the floor as she swayed to the music. "Daddy, look how pretty everything is," Lily exclaimed, pointing at the twinkling lights strung across the ceiling. "It's like stars inside." "Sure is, sweetheart," Ethan replied, squeezing her small hand. The decorations were elegant but welcoming, just like Isabella had wanted. She had insisted on making the gala accessible to everyone, transforming what was once an exclusive charity event into a true community celebration. The band struck up a familiar waltz, and Ethan's heart skipped. It was the same song that had played during that first rain-soaked evening when he'd found the courage to ask a crying stranger to dance. Isabella looked up at the music too, their eyes meeting across the crowd. Without hesitation, she made her way toward them, stopping to squeeze shoulders and exchange warm greetings with townspeople as she passed. These weren't the polite, distant interactions of, before these were the genuine connections of someone who had found her place in the community. "May I have this dance?" Isabella asked with a playful curtsy to Lily, who giggled and took her hand. "Only if Daddy dances too," Lily declared, grabbing Ethan's hand with her free one. The three of them moved to the center of the dance floor, other couples stepping back with knowing smiles to give them space. Lily twirled between them, her laughter pure and bright as she spun under their joined hands. "Remember how empty this place was?" Ethan asked softly, catching Isabella's eye, as they moved in time to the music. "How could I forget?" Isabella replied, her voice tender. "I was so lost that night, so convinced I'd never find what I was looking for." Lily ducked under their arms again, creating her own dance steps as she went. "Look at me! I'm a ballerina!" "You're the most beautiful ballerina I've ever seen," Isabella told her, and the love in her voice made Ethan's chest tighten. How far they'd come from that first awkward breakfast when Isabella had appeared at their door, uncertain of her welcome. The music swelled, and other couples joined them on the floor. Mr. Peterson from the hardware store danced with his wife of 50 years. Young Tommy from the diner swayed with his high school sweetheart. Even Mrs. Johnson had found a partner in the town's retired postman. "They're all here," Isabella murmured, watching the faces around them. "Not because they have to be, but because they want to be. Because we're all family now." Ethan pulled her closer, remembering how he'd once pushed her away, frightened by the attention their relationship had drawn. "I'm sorry I almost let fear win," he said quietly. "Shh," Isabella touched his cheek. "We both had to learn to be brave, to trust that love is worth the risk." Lily wedged herself between them, wrapping an arm around each of their waists. "Group hug," she announced, making them both laugh. The chandelier light caught the tears gathering in Isabella's eyes. But these weren't the lonely tears of their first meeting. These sparkled with joy as she looked at the little girl who had drawn her a family portrait and the man who had offered her a dance when she needed it most. "You both gave me a family," Isabella whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan smiled, holding her close as the lights shimmered around them, hope, love, and healing finally complete. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please, don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.